Beautiful Soul family, and welcome back to On Another Level. And the scriptures that I turn to, let me just say. So the scriptures that I turn to is Isaiah chapters 62, which speaks of Zion's restoration. 63 is about the Lord's Day of Vengeance, and it speaks about remembrance of grace. And then it goes on to further Israel's prayer, and chapter 64 okay, so all the way from Isaiah 63 verse 15 and chapter 64 speaks of Israel's prayer. But what's so interesting is that in 65, 6 and 5 is 11, and 11, 1 and 1 together makes 2. Here we have in Isaiah chapter 65, we have the Lord's response. Now, I also opened up my bigger Bible to Nehemiah chapter 9. And in Nehemiah chapter 9, it talks about a stiff-necked people. And so as I bring it together, because I don't really know what I'm going to say. I don't, because I pray, I wake up in the morning, I pray, I say, you know what? I thank you so much for bringing me through so that I can wake up this morning. So I can go accordingly in the continuum, according to your flow. And so I could be talking about love, or I can be talking about restoration, or I can be talking about peace, or I can talk about something that's wicked. I can be bringing forth truth. I can be bringing forth peace. It's all up to Divine Spirit. Okay? And so, what I am seeing here in Isaiah chapter 62, as brought out, it's about Zion's restoration. It's about the only one who can restore us is God the Almighty. But sadly enough, we have this tug of war. And Divine Spirit is showing me these things. We as a nation, we as a human race, alright, because there's only one race. There's a human race. And the human race has many tones, vibrations. It has many colors, like the rainbow. Divine Spirit, key points that I want to go over, the Divine Spirit is showing me is the lesson. As we read in Revelations, right? We see an Antichrist who is coming up. It says the dragon, right? It says the beast coming out from the sea. Brought out in Revelations. It speaks about an Antichrist. And as Divine Spirit was showing me, we have Yeshua and we had Barnabas. And people were choosing Barnabas. This wasn't forced upon them. But they chose to free Barnabas and kill Yeshua, even though that was according to the plan. But it was showing the energy of the people. And in the same way, people will be choosing the Antichrist. And they, as a whole, will come against God's people. Again, you see, in the Bible, it's about cycles and seasons, and it's about seeing things happen over and over again. But the question is, and I am included in this, beautiful soul family, is, have we figured out the why? I can get deeper because Divine Spirit was telling me about, in the very beginning, when man and woman was formed from the soil. Much different than how woman was formed from Adam's rib. And the question is, did mankind figure out the why? And when we learn the lessons, when we go to class, yes, it may be a new lesson, all right, a new class, but we're to learn the lesson, figure out the why, and as we figure out the why, it is from there that we glean the wisdom. Divine Spirit is saying, listen, Satan, the Antichrist, will only come through when society, when humanity has lowered its consciousness. You see, because that's what it's about. Divine Spirit is telling me that as in seed time and harvest, when you plant a seed and you nourish that seed, it grows. Right? Divine Spirit is telling me that the harvest, however, of such a tormented, demented seed is the Antichrist. And there are so many subliminal, so many things that has been put in the soils of the earth to produce such an Antichrist. Antichrist is about going against raising your consciousness. It goes against love. It goes against peace. It goes against justice. The Antichrist is raised from the sea of people because it is in the midst of filth, in the midst of immorality. You see, based on who you are on the inside is who you're going to attract. If you are of love and you are of peace, you will attract love and you will attract peace. And sometimes it feels like it's not happening. How come? If I'm thinking about love, if I'm thinking about peace, then how come I'm attracting the opposite? There are times where I have wondered that in my life. And the thing about it is that both the good and the bad are attracted to the light. But they are of different energies. One is attracted to the light because it's something that complements them, and one is attracted to the light because they're seeing what they can take. I know it seems like I'm going in different directions, but they're all connected. The thing about it, beautiful soul family, is that each of us are going through a tug and war. And we have to come to a knowing in our own life And the more we come to a knowing about the one solution that can truly save us is God the Almighty. As I was reading the scriptures, there comes a time where Zion is restored. But again, there's that tug of war where we're, riding the fence. And no, we're not perfect. Nobody's perfect. But there comes a point in your life when you say, I'm choosing love. No matter what, I'm choosing love. And I'm not going to betray love. I will not. In so many ways, it's about looking at what we do in our own life. And we have to say, I am going to stand up for love. I am going to choose love. Okay, so as we choose love, we don't find ourselves in a tug of war. Okay, so as I was reading this, Zion is getting restored, yes, but then goes back to its ways. Then cries out for help. Then is restored, but then goes back to its ways again. And so this is that tug of war that we're seeing in Nehemiah. And then we see restoration. Then there's the Lord's Day of Vengeance, brought out in 63. And a remembrance of grace. But then we have Israel's prayer. And what's so interesting in Israel's prayer, I see how it's being in a victimized mentality. And we need to get out of victimized mentality. And so anyways, when we're caught up in a tug of war, it's because we are restored, but then we go back to what caused us to be in the battle to begin with. And so this is why it's so important about going within with self-love, self-care, self-nurture. Because you can't rely upon somebody else. It is you going within you. That is the one seat for you. Okay? And again, this is something that we all must do, because here it says God's remembrance of grace. Here it says in verse 7, I will make known the Lord's faithful love and the Lord's praiseworthy acts, because of all the Lord has done for us, even the many good things he has done for his house of Israel, which he did for them based on his compassion and abundance of his faithful love. And so this is a message for the stiff-necked people. That's what the Divine Spirit is saying. Like, when you are in a relationship and a person continues and continues and continues to do the worst and yet wants to come back. The Divine Spirit was telling me some time ago in another video that you can forgive a person, but when they continue to do the same thing, continue to forgive, and hand it over to God the Almighty. But you look at their last actions. A person who is, the Divine Spirit is telling me there are people who are sorry and there are people who apologize. I was raised to not say, I am sorry. Because what I'm really saying is, I am a sorry person. I was raised to say, I apologize. When you say, I apologize, you're saying, you know what, I take accountability of what I have done, and it is my fault. And because of my actions, I bring myself to apologizing. But I take myself from a victimized mentality of feeling sorry. And I make the proper amends. And that's the difference between I am sorry and I apologize. But there are people who are indeed sorry. And they are caught up in sorrow. But they choose to be there. That's what a victimized mentality is. And in Israel's prayer, what I have come to see is victimized mentality. Also, victimized mentality it comes from codependency. But codependency in the worst way. Well, I felt like as I was reading this, I felt like to a degree in Israel's prayer, it's like, you know, you caused us to be this way. And the thing about it is that we have choice. You know what, I get irritated. I truly get irritated when someone says, this happened to you, but you caused it to happen to you. And this is not in all situations. Again, there are people who are sorry, and there are people who are apologetic. And you have to know who you are. There are people who continue to take the blame on themselves for others. There are people who continue to stay in victimized mentality and put the blame always on somebody else. There are people who cry out for help, get restored, only to go back. It's like being in a God forbid, a abusive relationship, whether it's physically abusive, emotionally abusive, mentally abusive, and you come out only to go back in. And this is why Divine Spirit is telling me to say, this is a message for the stiff-necked people. Choose a side and stick to it. Don't be as a baby. Play with fire. Get hurt. And then cry for safety. Cry to be saved. You've got to come to a point in your life to where you say, enough is enough. And so we are to pay attention to our last actions. What were our last actions? And are we on this Ferris wheel? In our minds, are we in this tug of war? Divine Spirit is telling me as we are in this tug of war energy where we are playing with fire, but then we want to be saved. Or we throw a stone and hide our hand, and once people know that you're throwing the stone, you want safety, you want forgiveness, you want so many things, you get it, and then you go back. Divine Spirit is telling me this is a message. It's so interesting, Divine Spirit is saying to my stiff-necked people. When I think about a stiff neck, and I have to make sure I'm recording. So when I think about a stiff-necked people, I remember there were times when I would have the fan going and I would sleep on one side and the cold was on that side. And so when I woke up the next morning, it was just such a stiff neck. And when I think about that, a stiff neck comes when you are sleeping in one position, have taken rest in one position that causes you to be vulnerable to the cold. But you don't change your position. You don't change your actions. You stay and you take rest in it. The Divine Spirit is telling me, you cannot ride the fence. As we look in Revelations, we see a stiff-necked people who rejoice over the death of the witnesses. And they rejoice over the death of the witnesses because, interesting enough, the Divine Spirit is telling me to read it. In Revelations. Here it says, when they finish their testimony, okay? Let's see. Here I'm reading from Revelations chapter 11. Chapter 11, verse 7. It says, when they finish their testimony, the beast that comes up out of the abyss will make war on them, conquer them, and kill them. Their dead bodies will lie in the main street of the great city, which figuratively is called Sodom and Egypt. What's so interesting is that Sodom was connected to Gomorrah. But here Sodom is connected to Egypt. For quite some time I would say Sodom and Gomorrah and Egypt. But here it says Sodom and Egypt, where also their Lord was crucified. And some of the peoples, tribes, languages, and nations will view their bodies for 3.5 days and not permit their bodies to be put in the tomb. Those who live on the earth will gloat over them and celebrate and send gifts to one another because these two prophets had tormented those who live on the earth. Here we go back to here. It says, they have their authority, in verse 6, Chapter 11, verse 6, they have the authority to close up the sky so that it does not rain during the days of their prophecy. They also have the power over the waters to turn them into blood and to strike the earth with every plague whenever they want. This is about the why, correct? When we go through a lesson, we're in a class, we're learning a lesson, really it's about the why. It's not so much about what happened, the cause and effect, but it's also about why. Because of the cause, it generated the effect. But what caused it? Why? Right? So what and why? Okay? So here, why did the witnesses do such a thing as they're prophesying? I'll tell you why. Here it says in verse 5, if anyone wants to harm them, fire comes from their mouths. It's not if anyone wants to make peace with them. If anyone wants to harm them, fire comes from their mouths and consumes their enemies. If anyone wants to harm them, he must be killed in this way. They have their authority and so on and so forth. But it's about these people coming together to harm. So there are people who are coming together to harm the witnesses as they're prophesying, as they're speaking on repenting. It's important to repent. It's important to rebuild your relationship with God the Almighty. It's important to turn from the ways of the world. What is so interesting, and I have to go back to Isaiah. Isaiah 62, restoration. 63, the Lord's day of vengeance, remembrance of grace. Divine Spirit told me to go to Revelations because where do you find yourself? Honest. Do you find yourself amongst the stiff-necked people? Because they took rest in the comforts of the world. The coldness of the world, because the world doesn't give love. It doesn't give justice. It doesn't give peace. But you rest in it. Something bad happens and then you say, oh, why God? But it wasn't God that caused it. It's the world. Then you cry out to God. God gives you restoration, but then you go back to the world. And it's because it's a vicious cycle. You haven't learned the reason why. You go back because you don't see the contrast. You don't see the difference. You go back because there are certain energies within you that needs to disintegrate. You go back because your focus is not on God primarily. It goes back to the world. So you're getting healed, then you go back. Then you get hurt. Then you go to healing. And it's a vicious cycle. And Divine Spirit is saying enough is enough. You are indeed a stiff-necked people. It is God the Almighty because we are given grace, remembrance of grace. But the thing about it is, are we remembering when we were caught up in shame, caught up in depression, caught up in stress, caught up in strife? Are we remembering? It's like Divine Spirit is saying selective memory. Are we remembering when God restored us, saved us, restored us, healed us? Are we in that memory? Because this tug of war is but one level, and we have to raise our consciousness. There's so much other levels. But it is us that must get ourselves from the tug of war. It's like, so we're caught up in this tug of war, and when we feel like we're losing, then we call out for God. And God takes us from that tug of war right? Heals us, restores us. I don't really know when this ended, but the thing about it is, beautiful soul family, this is indeed a tough message. It's a tough pill to swallow. But it is something that we have to ask ourselves. You know, there's a level of accountability that must be taking place with us. Divine Spirit is showing me this. You have a person that's in the middle. Again, it's coming back to this. And I don't know if it was captured by the camera. But Divine Spirit is showing me a person in the middle, a person on the left, and a person on the right. And there is this tug of war. But it's this person that must decide to come up from that tug of war. But, you know, they stick to one side, one position. Then they ask for healing. They come out of it in order to heal you. You got to come out of it. But if there are still things that connect you, that you yourself choose not to let go of, then you go back. It's like something that's trying not to die within, and it's going back to that abusive relationship, whether it's abusive physically or abusive emotionally, abusive mentally. And those are the strings that need to be cut. Divine Spirit was telling me that, you know, in an abusive relationship, there's a lot of training that's taking place. There's a predator sees its prey and wants to control the innocence. All right, harness that innocent energy. And so what happens is that predator trains the person to stay. It's like we're trained to keep our phones in our hands. If we have Apple Watches, we're trained to keep the watch on our wrist. And how are we trained? By getting us to feel like we need it. And we can't live without it. And so the abuser trains their prey by thinking that they are the ones that caused it, that they deserved it, by making them feel like they're worthless without them, that it's all because of you. I beat you because of you. I cheat on you because of you. If it wasn't because of you, I wouldn't have done this. And so the abuser pushes all their toxicities upon the person that chooses to take it. See, because it's choice. And because it's about choice, sadly, there are people who choose to stay in abusive relationships. And this is not just about friendships and family members and lovers. It's about humanity. The world is a karmic, and then we have the kingdom of God. And it's this vicious tug of war that we need. We need. The individual that's receiving the abuse has to accept accountability. Am I going to be a person that is sorry and stuck in sorrow and be victimized? Or am I going to be a person that says enough is enough? When I cry out to Divine Spirit and I do get the healing, am I going to level up and turn my back against the abuser? Because the abuser, Divine Spirit, is also telling me an accuser. So when I think about the accuser, I'm thinking what comes up is Satan. Satan steals, kills, and destroys. In this abusive relationship between humanity and the world, which is the home. You see, in a home, I don't know why Divine Spirit is showing me this, but in a home, we have an abuser and we have someone who's being abused. And the world is that house of which all of these actions are taking place. And the stiff-necked people are people who are choosing to stay in one position and take the cold, where they have the power to turn their neck, to bring forth action. But they choose not. They stay asleep. They stay in comfort. They stay in rest in situations that they know. But why do they stay in rest in that? Because they are caught up in sorrow. Where the ones that are saying sorry is the ones that's taking the pain. Oh, I'm sorry. They see themselves as sorry because the abuser trained their minds to think that they are sorry. So then you are in a victimized mentality. You stay because you are victimized. You're in a victimized mentality. You're caught up in sorrow because you feel like you need to be there. Oh, it's my fault that he beats on me or she beats on me. It's my fault because of the emotional pain that they put me through. It's my fault. It's not them. It's me. If only I did this the way they wanted me to do it, then I wouldn't be abused. If only I said what he wanted or she wanted me to say, then everything would be fine. If only I live my life according to how they want me to live my life, then everything would be great. But the thing about it is that the abuser doesn't want you to live your life according to your purpose. Wants you to be another template. Wants you to live your life according to how they see fit. As long as you do this, then you won't get this gang stalking. You won't get this slander. Do what I tell you to do, and as I say to do it, and you will not be abused. But that mind, that mentality, that type of control is abuse within itself. And here we have Divine Spirit hearing your cries, whether loud or silent. Get you out of that situation. Pulls you out of that situation. Heals you. And then the world calls you back. Remember this money? Remember this lifestyle? But it is you that must say no. The world doesn't have what I need. The world doesn't give me healing from pain. The world doesn't nourish my soul. And there are those who say, no, I'm not going to return back to the world. I'm not going to return back to another abusive relationship. I am not going to rest back into a position where I am subjected to the code. I'm going to level up. And no, I may not have the money. And no, I may not have the notoriety. And no, I may not have this. I may not have that. But who I have is God the Almighty. And what I have is everlasting healing. And when I build a house, I will live in it. And when I plant a seed, I will receive the harvest. It won't be, I build a house and someone else lives in it. It won't be, I plant a seed and someone else takes the harvest. No. It won't be me taking the abuse from an abuser and still be caught up in sorrow. Because when Divine Spirit heals you, you're calling out, Divine Spirit, heal me from this situation. Because Divine Spirit is not going to come against your will. Ask and you shall receive. Heal me from this situation. But you yourself must bring endings to cycles. It's about understanding that not only are you calling out for God for rescuing, but you must, God Almighty is also empowering you to bring forth those change to those cycles, for you to cut those cords, you to cut those connections. It is you that takes away your energy, because really in an abusive relationship, the abuser is putting forth the pressure upon you as like the olive to get out that energy. But it is up to you. Are you going to choose to continue to be a stiff-necked people? Or are you going to remove your energy from this world once and for all? Because as long as you continue to hop from one place to another, Divine Spirit is telling me the Lord's response from chapter 65 of Isaiah, verse 13. It says, therefore, this is what the Lord God says. My servants will eat, but you will be hungry. My servants will drink, but you will be thirsty. My servants will rejoice, but you will be put to shame. You see, there's two sides. The one says, seek God the Almighty and move on once and for all. They were once hungry. They saw the contrast. When I'm in the world, I'm hungry. They're not really feeding me. What they feeding me? Chemicals, lies, programming, brainwashing. What's really in an abusive relationship? As I said, if you don't do what they say, if you don't live how they want you to live, if you don't do what they want you to do, then you get abused. And instead of taking the accountability for themselves because they're caught up in their own abuse, they put the blame on you. The Divine Spirit is telling me this is the mind of a narcissist. The abuser is the narcissist. And instead of taking accountability for what they do, they put the blame on you. It's like what I was watching someone, and I'm not mentioning names, but they were stating that the reason why we're caught up in this pollution is because of you. But it was their products that the general population bought. So who brought forth the abuse to the earth? The chicken or the egg? Right? Who came first? Who caused the pain first is what I'm trying to say. Is it the one that's producing the products? Or is it the buyer? Or is it both? My point is that the abuser doesn't take the accountability. It's so funny because the abuser is the first one that places the accusation on you. And then tries to train your mind to think that it's your fault. The truth be told, you may have a role in it. And the role that you play is you're deciding to stay there and take that pain. And that indeed is stiff-necked. Where you know you can turn your direction, turn your positioning of your head, change your focus. But you continue to rest. And that of which only brings you hate and abuse. See, the cold is likened to not of love. It's not love, because love is of warmth and of peace, comfort and restoration, healing. But the cold is something that is not of love. It's conditioned. You see what's so interesting? Divine Spirit is saying the conditioner, right? So like the fan. You have your head in one position and the vent may be right there on your neck. And it's blowing that cold air, conditions. And you stay in that one area. And then you wake up in the morning and you have the stiff neck. But you have the power to change your position. You have the power to bring forth actions to change your focus, to level up. And so humanity is going through this tug of war. So here it says, in Nehemiah chapter 9, because my eyes fell to it as I was first reading this, and verse 25 says, and they took strong cities and a fat land, and possessed houses full of all goods, wells, digged vineyards, and olive yards, and fruit trees in abundance, so they did eat, and were filled, and became fat, and delighted themselves in thy great goodness. Nevertheless, they were disobedient, and rebelled against thee, and cast thy law behind their backs, and slew the prophets, which testified against them, to turn them to thee. And they wrought great provocations. Therefore thou deliverest them into the hand of their enemies. You're choosing the people through your actions. See, the sea of the people chose the Antichrist and decided to come against the witnesses. The witnesses were telling them the truth, but they decided, I want to go with this illusion. I want to go with this lie. And so they came up with their harvest, but they were eluded to believe that the lie was the truth, but the truth that they were getting from the world was actually lies. It's again like an abuser. The abuser wants you to see a certain way, and they want you to live your life in a certain way. And you're thinking this is the way, and you turn your back against the one that is helping you, only to realize that now you are back at square one with this abuser taking on the pain. What's so interesting is here in Isaiah chapter 63, chapter 63 in verse 15, where it talks about Israel's prayer, right? But in chapter 64, here, let me read it. It says, look down from heaven and see, from your lofty home, holy and beautiful. Where is your zeal and your might, your yearning and your compassion are withheld from me? Yet you are our Father, even though Abraham does not know us and Israel does not recognize us. You, Lord, are our Father. Your name is our Redeemer, and from ancient times. Why, Lord, do you make us stray from your ways? You see, they're not taking accountability You harden our hearts, so we do not fear you. Return because of your servants, the tribes of your heritage. Your holy people had a possession for a little while, but our enemies have trampled down your sanctuary. We have become like those you have never ruled, like those who did not bear your name. In 64, what is so interesting, because it continues on from Israel's prayer, is that if you would tear the heavens open and come down, so that the mountains would quake at your presence, just as a fire kindles a brushwood and fire boils water, to make your name known to your enemies, so that the nations will tremble at your presence. When you did awesome works that we did not expect, you came down, and the mountains quaked at your presence. Now, again, it's saying, if only you would do this, right? From the ancient times, no one has heard, no one has listened to, no eye has seen any God except you, who acts on behalf of the one who waits for him. You welcome the one who joyfully does what is right. They remember you in your ways. But we have sinned, and you were angry. How can we be saved if we remain in our sins? All of us have become like something unclean, and all our righteous acts are like a polluted garment. All of us wither like a leaf, and our iniquities carry us like the wind. No one calls on your name, striving to take hold of you, for you have hidden your face from us and made us melt because of our iniquity. What I got from this is, God did. You see, when we ourselves, as mentioned, when we ourselves don't cut those ties, don't bring the ending to certain cycles to move towards new seasons, don't cut the past off to be present and mindful for what is taking place, then we can't move on. And we can't see what God the Almighty has done. We go back to Israel. Israel, before he wrestled with the angel, he was Jacob. And Jacob was caught up in energies of needing to take in order to have. Take of something that wasn't his. Take of a blessing that wasn't his. You see, because it wasn't just one time. There were other times. The Divine Spirit is telling me that Jacob will say, I'll give you this food for your blessing. And Esau, interesting enough, did not really appreciate his blessing. And so was so caught up in the energy of just wanting the food. How many of us don't understand our blessings and our gifts, and we quickly trade it off for something that is temporary? And the Divine Spirit is showing me that this is what's going on as well. We have an abuser, and we have someone taking on the abuse. And there is an exchange of powers. There's exchange of energy, where the abuser constantly preys upon the innocence of the one being abused. But it's about choice. And the choice is, when you cry out for God to be saved, you have got to continue to move on. You cannot stay in that abusive relationship, because the abuser is there to steal your energy, kill your spirit, and destroy you. steal, kill, and destroy. And this is not why God empowers us. God doesn't empower us to go back in and take on more pain. God empowers us and gives us a way out from the pain. And in order to keep on going, you have to cut the connections to the world. And this is something that we all need to do, but we need to change our perception of what actually is going on. It's time to come from a relationship where you're doing the work and they're taking the credit. It's time for you to build your house and live in it. Not build your house and have others live in it. It's time for you to, when you do the work, it is you that take of the harvest. Not you do the work and someone else takes the harvest. And the Divine Spirit is calling us. He says, I'm healing you so you can continue forth in excellence. But it is you that chooses to come out of this tug of war. Are you adding to it? Are you adding to this battle by staying in the midst of it when the Divine Spirit is healing you and empowering you to remove yourself by taking the path that the Divine Spirit has given to us? It's as though we're caught up. The Divine Spirit provides a way. That's just paraphrasing, right? Provides a way out. Okay, as we're in the midst of going to that way out, we're being healed so that we can continue to go on that path. But as we are on the way out and Divine Spirit is healing, are we finding ourselves returning back? Divine Spirit is reminding me of what Yeshua told this person, that you have been made clean, you have been healed. Do not do those things again, or else will come back on you and even worse. It's likened to a person that was smoking, and then they stopped smoking, and their lungs are made clean, and they don't have a taste. Well, actually, their lungs are made clean, but somehow they still have a taste for it, for the cigarette, or for the weed, or whatever. And you must cut off that taste. Because it is the habit, it is the taste for it, the longiness. It's a different type of taste, which brings you back to smoking again. Once your lungs are clean and pure, but then you go back to smoking, or go back to an abusive relationship, or go back to whatever it is, ... you fill in the blank. And it becomes even worse. It becomes even worse because now the person that is telling you, come out of it, come out of that abusive relationship, there's no love there. Now you're looking at that person whom you cried out for, you're looking at them as the enemy, and this is what's taking place in Revelations. And you're so stuck in that abuse because it's worse, right? And so now instead of crying and asking for the one to rescue you, now you're coming against those very people. It's like it's like you cry out in your prayers, please save me, please send me someone that I can love, please send me someone that can love me back wholeheartedly. And God answers your prayers and sends you that person. But before they send you that person, you get a glimpse of who that person is. And even before that, you get some type of healing, right? Whatever it is. And then, instead of continuing on a path to that person that you cried out for, it doesn't even have to be a person. It could be a way out. A refuge. But then as you're in the midst and you're being healed so that you can complement that of which you deserve, you go back. And then the person that abused you before, it's even worse, because now they are increasing, to try to hold you the more. And it's even worse. And then it comes to a point after all that tug of war has taken place. Now you begin to look at that person that was deserved for you, the one that you prayed for, the situation that you prayed for, and you look at it and you say, it is that person that is coming against me. And then you believe that the one that really is abusing you is the one that is meant for you. Or the situation that is coming against you is the situation that you deserve to be in, because it's caught up in that sorrow. This happens to an individual, but it is also happening to the human race. But interesting enough, we have the power still to say no. But it's all up to you. Do you choose to continue to be a stiff-necked people? Or do you change your position and your focus? And with those actions of empowerment, go down the path that sadly is far less chosen. See, because the Bible doesn't lie. And God doesn't lie. But the oppressor, the accuser, the abuser will always steal, kill, and destroy. And it's all up to you.